Welcome to Allegheny Scout Camps and their predecessors, part one. This is actually going to be a three-part with the other two scheduled at a later time, because as you can see here by our list of camps, we have quite a bit to cover just for this one or two councils. So part one, we're going to cover summer camps from 1913 to 16. We'll cover Camp Guysuda, the beginning portion of Camp Laurel Mountain, Camp Umsteader, Dean Reservation, Camp Baker, and Hubbard Reservation. The first two parts of this video are going to focus specifically on the Allegheny Council 527 camps. And the second part will cover Allegheny Trail Scout camps, which will include Camp Anawana from the Washington Green Council and Heritage Reservation. So starting out with the summer camps from 1913 to 1916, from the information we can find, and I got to give a shout out to Neil Bronder, who's a little bit north from where I'm at up in PA. He did some fantastic research on the original summer camps, which, as you know, when in the early teens, when scouting didn't have a lot of camps, they would just pick an area and set a camp up. So in 1913, we have Camp and Cook Woods, located in the what is now the Allegheny National Forest. 1914, we have Camp Chief White Pine, which was located in Dark Hollow Oakmont in Allegheny County. The picture you see on the right is actually from Camp Chief White Pine. That's a picture of one of their campfires, and from everything I can find and other guys in Western PA, we think it's the oldest photo of camping, at least from a council out of Pittsburgh.
Wow.
1915 and 1916, we have Camp Chief Red Oak and Camp Chief Silvertip. They were both located on the banks of the Connoquenessing Creek next to the Elwood City Country Club in Butler County, which is a little bit further north for the Pittsburgh councils. Now, we're not sure if there's any still in existence, but we have these two letters here from, let me see here if I can read it. Oh, I can't. Oh, Arthur Handock. And it's basically bringing to attention of the National Supply Group that they're looking at getting some emblems made for Camp Chief Red Oak. And in the letter here, which you guys are more than welcome to read it or ask me for it at the end of the video, and I can send it to you. But they talk about different emblems they've used in the past and what they're looking at using now. And it says here that they've used something like a groundhog skin, and they're looking to get a finch made on felt. And you can see here the letter from the National Supply Group that says they will be able to fill that order. So the first camp that we had that was an established camp was Camp Guysuda. It's located in Sharpsburg, PA, and it's still open to this day. These pictures you see on the front here are some of the earliest photos that I can find. The one is the original gate. We have on the right side top, Darlington Lodge, which burned down in the 40s or the 50s. So sadly, you can't see it today, but the foundation is very easy to find if you visit Camp Guysuda. The picture on the bottom right there is the old camp sign that now replaces what you see as the Guysuda Reservation sign on the left. That sign has probably been replaced 3 or 4 times since then, and it's located right below Route 28. So here on the top left, we have the Seneca Lodge, which is our trading post at camp. That building is still standing. I think it's one of the only original buildings left. And I would show you more pictures of Guysuda, but if you look up Camp Guysuda on Google, you're going to find tons of information and pictures because it is probably the most active scout camp year-round that I've ever seen. It's only located about 15 minutes outside of Pittsburgh, so it's got a great location, and it's a real hidden gem in the city. So you're looking at a lot of felt patches now on the screen. That first one that kind of looks like a camel, but everybody says it's Pedro the donkey. Guysuda used to have a Pedro, and the sort of back and forth is who had it first, Guysuda or Philmont. I'm not really sure, who to go with, but that image is from campimages.com, I think is the website. There's 2 different ones up there. One is like a darker felt, the other's a lighter felt. I think it's just the lighting in the photo, but they're both from 1923. The next one is a felt on felt G. that sort of fits the time frame of the mid-20s, similar to some other items from camps we have. You'll see these two small felt wagons that are screen printed. Those are an accurate size to what you're seeing as a 3-inch round next to it. I believe it was Ben Wasmer had one on a merit badge sesh probably about a year or so ago up in the Facebook group, and it was the first time I had ever seen one in person to be able to judge the size. But both of those images are from the Camp Images site. 1938, they used that generic round green silk screening with the backpack, shovel, and axe. And then you see here that they start what I call sort of a signature for Allegheny Council, where they use this red felt circle with the campfire with the camp initial. Now, those are the images I can find for some of those. I'm sure there's other years other than 39 and 1940. And then the one that doesn't have a year, just based off experience with some of the other stuff from Western PA, specifically the Pittsburgh area, that one without a year, we believe comes out after the patches that have a year, just to sort of, if we're going with consistency with the other patches. So this is where we're starting to get interesting with Guysuda patches, because I was always told there's not a lot of Guysuda patches, really because one ranger there at the time hated patches and he didn't want to make patches. But you can see on the top left there, we have a Guysuda camporee from 1955. That's a silk screen felt. And there's sort of a debate whether it's a camp issue or a district issue, because in Pittsburgh here, we always get a lot of confusion over camp Guysuda items and Guysuda district items, because on a lot of stuff, they just like to put Guysuda and they never label it camp or district. The 5 items you're going to see sort of in the center there of the screen, being the 2 logs on the left side of that, those fit with the generic Allegheny Council Scout Camps and Allegheny Trails Council Scout Camps Arrowhead patch. They did a series where they had these logs that fit with it, and they had one for each camp. You guys will see those in part 2 when we cover specifically the Allegheny Scout Camps memorabilia. They use the square, we call it the square log first, and then the round log, which has that lighter twill back. And then the small black one fits, that's the 3rd log. They're really tiny, almost smaller than a dime, and they're a pain to find. We lose them all the time. The next rockers you see are those red and white. Those fit with a series from the Allegheny Trails Council from 1976 called Be a Bell Ringer patch. It had a bunch of different segments for events the council did, and it had a segment for each camp. Now, the 2 different ones you're seeing there are 2 different sizes, and they have different radiuses of the arc. The top one fits around the 3-inch round, and we have no idea what's going on with the bottom one, because if you try to put them all together, it does not make a perfect circle. So all we can come up with is that they ran out of the camp ones and reordered, and they just did not fit, which is pretty typical for rockers. The bottom left of the screen, you're going to see 2 patches from the early and mid 70s. The first one is a generic emblem they sold in the trading post. And the next one is the stream improvement at Guysuda. Guysuda has the Guysuda run, which goes right through the center of camp. And it causes a lot of issues at camp back in the day with flooding and just erosion and everything. So they did a little program, stream improvement, where people could come out and help with some service projects or conservation projects along the stream, and they got this cool patch. The one you're going to see that has the 2 rockers, it's a Weebela's Overnight and Wiki Up Weekend. Those were events that Guysuda used to hold, and the Frontier Days was this generic emblem that would go in the center. Now, it's tough to see it on the screen, but that is from 1989. It's another one that we see more commonly associated with the camp, but we're pretty sure it was hosted by the district. And then here's my favorite set of Guysuda patches, for the sole reason that when I think I've got them all, I find another color combo. So we've got the Guysuda with the feathered circle, or feathered shield as I call it. We've got it with the blue twill and yellow border, maroon twill and yellow border, and then we have it as an orange twill with a red border. And then about 4 weeks ago, I find another one where Guysuda is phrased differently on it. You got camp at the top and Guysuda at the bottom. And those just pop up all the time. Those come from the late 80s to early 90s, where they were sort of sticking with the same type of emblem. And it's really from a time when they were referring to camp as Guysuda Scoutland. And they had tons of programs. They used to bring a bus around to certain locations in city neighborhoods and bring scouts out during the week. And a big one was if you partialed a merit badge at resident camp at one of the other camps, you could finish it at Guysuda sometime throughout the year because Guysuda was so close to the city. And so those Camp Guysuda rounds with the feathered shields come from a time when they called it Guysuda Scoutland. So Guysuda Lazy Devils and Camp Service. The Lazy Devils is a great Guysuda history. The Lazy Devils group was a camp service group, not pre-OA, but in conjunction with the OA. They had 3 levels that all associated with the amount of service hours you gave. The first level was the patch, which you can see there on the top left. It's kind of an interesting looking patch for a scout patch. The next level was a coffee cup you could get that had the decal you see on the bottom left on it, and then a hard hat that also had the decal you see at the bottom. I can never figure out how many hours of service you had to provide to camp to get these emblems, because there are still members of the Lazy Devil groups around, and boy, do they not like to talk about Lazy Devils. They love to talk and say they were part of Lazy Devils, but they don't like to say what the Lazy Devils did other than camp service. You can see here on the map in the center of the screen, towards the top left of it, that there is a Lazy Devils cabin at camp. That cabin is located at what is now the Cope course at Camp Guysuda, and Cope is probably one of their busiest programs there. So in the late 70s, we have a letter at the camp. I haven't seen a copy of it, but the ranger says he has it framed. It's a letter from the National OA chairman to our council executive saying to cease and desist the Guysuda Lazy Devils program because it was becoming more popular at the camp than the Order of the Arrow. So the program sort of ended, and all this material behind it sort of just went away. Nobody knew what happened with the extra patches or the decals until sometime in the early 2000s when the ranger at Camp Baker found a bunch of them at Camp Baker and gave them to a collector. And the reason all of them made it out there is because the ranger who was one of the big guys behind the Lazy Devils program, Vince Barr, after the program had ended, he kept all the patches and decals and then requested that he move to Camp Baker rather than Guysuda because Baker has a lot more fields and he could fly his remote control airplanes out there. Literally the story I was told. Only wanted to move camps because he couldn't fly his remote control airplanes at Camp Guysuda. So you're going to see then on the right, we have Camp Guysuda Ranger Service Awards and 10 hours of beaver service. Those were given for 10 hours of service, both of them. The first one that came out was the Camp Guysuda Ranger Service, and the next one that came out was the 10 hours beaver service. That's the second version of the Beaver Service Award. There is the same design on a light blue twill background, and that was used by Greater Pittsburgh Council at all of their camps, being Anawanna, Baker, Guysuda, Heritage, and Twin Echo. And we're still using that patch now as Laurel Highlands because we have that many of them. On the bottom, you're going to see 2 patches that everybody wishes National Supply made. Well, guess what they did? They're custom for Camp Guysuda. They're Camp Master patches. The first one that came out was the one that matches the colors of a troop volunteer, being the tan border and tan twill background. And the next one that actually just came out this year matches the colors of more of the camp staff position patch. That Camp Master patch is actually being used at all the Laurel Highlands Council camps right now that have a Camp Master program. So more on Camp Guysuda patches, we have more rounds that follow the same color combination, switch ups and all that like the older ones. That one in the center that has a white border and green background, I didn't actually know about until I found it on Chris Jensen's site about 4 weeks ago and immediately picked it up. The white border with the gray twill background was being used in the late 90s and early 2000s. I remember picking up that patch from the trading post when I first went to Guysuda. And then you're going to see the square one right there that celebrates the 75 years of Guysuda. and you're going to see the dates 1926 to 2001, which conflict with our established in 1918 date. So a little bit of early history on Guysuda. The original owners of the property, the Darlington family, were going to gift the property to the Allegheny Council because scouts had been welcome to camp on it since 1918. And that's when the council was doing a lot of their resident programs and stuff there. However, the Darlington family and the Pennsylvania Railroad had a huge dispute over who owned the land from the entrance of Guysuda, which is now Route 28, up until the Allegheny River banks. And you fought the Pennsylvania Railroad and you lost. And so the scouts actually weren't gifted the property and held the title in their name until 1926. So in the early 2000s, they were going off of the 1926 date, but for pretty much every other anniversary they've celebrated, they've used the date of 1918 because that's when Camp Guysuda was first established. The patch on the bottom left there is a generic Camp Guysuda Pittsburgh, PA patch they used to sell in the trading post. The one in the center is, I think, one of the first ever photo sublimated patches. It doesn't have any embroidery other than the rolled edge, but that patch came out in 2004 or 5 when the McGinnis Education Center was built at camp. And it's got dorm rooms and classrooms and everything with it. And it's used a lot by a lot of school groups and scout groups that go out to Guysuda. The patch you see on the right, Camp Guysuda, with some of the, we'll call them little critters you see around camp. That was in the trading post and it was stocked for a long time. Nothing too special or associated with an event with that patch. Same thing with the one on the top left. You see Camp Guysuda, Greater Pittsburgh Council. That patch was in the trading post for a long time. I remember still buying them after we had merged, and they only sold out maybe a year or two after we merged in 11. The patch on the center there, it says the Dale Lincoln Nature Trail, Camp Guysuda. The nature trail was added to camp sometime, I want to say around 2008-ish, and it goes from the main area of camp that's used all the way to the back of the property along the Guysuda Run stream to this beautiful natural waterfall they have in the back. You used to be able to slide down it because it was kind of one of those waterfalls, but the way the water has changed the rocks and everything recently, you can't do that too much anymore. And then you'll see the next CSP we have from Greater Pittsburgh Council that says 90th anniversary of Camp Guysuda. That came out in 2008, and it features 3 of the activities we do at Guysuda, being our pool and sprinkler area, general scout camping, and the climbing wall. The COPE program is probably one of the biggest programs Guysuda operates. I worked there in 2010 and then again in 2016, and it was COPE every day, all year round. So you'll see the next patch, which is fitting for that theme, being a carabiner with the zip liner on it. And then for a while, we replaced our generic trading post round with this ghosted camp logo. A little tough to see on the screen there, but that is the Guysuda Indian head. And then we started stocking this Camp Guysuda Cope patch. We stocked that for a long time, and there are 2 different versions. There's a light green and a dark green. If anybody has the light green, I'd love to pick one up. And then we have the third Guysuda CSP, Laurel Highlands Council Camp Guysuda, 95 years of scouting adventure. That came out in 2013. And then we go to Camp Guysuda in 2018 for their patches. So you'll see here a set that kind of is reminiscing of a jamboree set with several CSPs around it. These are not CSPs. These are just sort of massive size rockers that fit around about a 4-inch pentagon patch. And it features the 5 main activities they do at Guysuda, being shooting sports, both archery and BB, or pellet guns, zip lining and climbing. And then the 2 patches on the bottom and the bottom left feature canoeing and the Pittsburgh Point, as well as biking. Guysuda has a great program called the Paddles to Pedals, where you'll canoe down the Allegheny River from Guysuda to the point of Pittsburgh, and then you'll bike back there. It's about a day-long program. It's pretty fun for the scouts. Now, the patches you see on the right, you see, this is the first time this has actually been presented to anybody other than myself and the camp ranger, but this was the prototype for the 100th anniversary of Camp Guysuda. And you'll see it features the Guysuda Indian head, as well as the waterfall background. That's Washboard Falls. That's all the way in the back of the property at Guysuda. Now, the reason that this patch wasn't made, there was a couple factors. The ranger didn't think it looked too much like the waterfall, and I gotta agree, the people took some creative liberties with it. But Guysuda in 2018 had 2 massive floods that pretty much wiped out all the bridges over the stream, took out a bunch of trees. And our main focus at that point wasn't getting a patch out for the 100th anniversary. It was getting camp open so all the kids arriving for day camp the next day would have a place to come for day camp. Well, we sort of, if we forgot about it a little bit, and when we came back to it, we were working on a big council anniversary set in 2019. And you'll see that patch on the bottom there that features the Pittsburgh skyline, and where you see the Guysuda Indian head on that patch. If you stand on the right side of the Guysuda, we'll call it valley, right above Route 28, you can see the Pittsburgh skyline from camp. So that's what we finally settled on as the centennial patch for Guysuda. All right, so moving on to the next camp, we have Camp Laurel Mountain. So Camp Laurel Mountain, if you notice the 3 dates across the top there, we have 1922 to 1952, and then 1952 to 1977. So Camp Laurel Mountain was originally owned and operated by the Duquesne Council, and they used it as their main resident camp until they were absorbed back into the Allegheny Council in the mid-30s. The reason you see the date of 1952 is because when the Duquesne Council was transferred from the Allegheny Council to the Homestead District Council in 1952, Camp Laurel Mountain went under the ownership of what was then the Monongahela Valley Council. So the picture you see on the left there is actually from 1922. It's a picture of Camp Laurel Mountain, and I think it's just a fantastic photo with the tents. You can see the old cars in the background and scouts being real active. And I'll give a shout out to Neil Bronder from up in Moraine Trails Council for finding that photo. It is an awesome photo. The 2 patches you see on the right, you can see that signature almost reddish orange felt with the white printing on it with an L for Laurel Mountain. That was the first Laurel Mountain patch from Allegheny Council that I can find from all the research up here. I don't believe there's any earlier ones, but I could be wrong. And in the patch right below that is the first embroidered patch on twill from Laurel Mountain. And the design, remember that one because you're going to see a similar one to it a little bit later. But those are the only patches I can fit into the time frame of 1922 to 1952. Everything else after that I can find clearly states Monongahela Valley Council on it. And we'll cover more of Camp Laurel Mountain in a different session when we go over some of those camps. So Camp Umsteader, 1924 to 1946. So Camp Umsteader was donated in memory of, I believe his name was John Umsteader, by his family. It was located in Sewickley, which is now, the area of camp is Bella Acres Nature Reserve, which is still in Sewickley Township, probably about 15, 20 minutes from downtown Pittsburgh. You can still find some of the sites at camp. You can find the foundation of the pool, the entrance to the chapel, and part of the fireplace to the dining hall. But if you see on the left there, that picture comes out of a Pittsburgh Press newspaper clipping from 1931, just a scout doing the morning bugle calls. The next picture you see in the top center, that's the camp dining hall. Now, a lot of these pictures nobody has seen before, just because we sort of rediscovered them at the council from an old property appraisal report we found from 1946. So all these pictures, they were literally in this appraisal, shoved in a filing cabinet, and I don't think anybody looked at them in years. And finally, we found them last year during COVID and thought, well, heck, let's scan all these. So like I said, top left or center left, you see the Camp Umsteader Dining Hall. The top right is the Camp Ranger's house. And then the bottom center is interesting. So all the photos we can find of Umsteader, I can't find a single one that has a tent. I mean, there's no tents at this camp. However, there's tons of cabins that have these canvas roofs. And so this is the, I believe, Kit Carson stockade, because on all the maps and different photos we can find, they're all labeled and they're calling their campsites stockades. And they all have these buildings very similar in structure where they're kind of cabins up on stilts and they have canvas roofs. And they named them after different adventure stories. You know, they had Buffalo Bill campsite, Kit Carson campsite, Lewis and Clark stockade. So tons of different ones. Robinson Crusoe stockade was another one. And then the pole you can see on the right here, in 1946, the camp was closed and it was sold to the Greek Society of Pittsburgh. The pole, however, was used by the community for a long time afterward. And so I'm not entirely sure when the pole closed, but it definitely wasn't in 1946. So here's the good stuff here. I'm sure many of us have seen some of these either from the Camp Images website or, you know, those massive eBay sales where everybody's watching it, but they're not bidding and they're watching two people go at it. Well, the first row of patches you see on the top is either the initial patches where you have a U, felt on felt, or a CU. Those first two images come from the Camp Images website. And the one on the right, those come out of a frame that Steve DeWick had at the Pittsburgh Traderie 2 years ago. And you can see here that there are two different sizes of the black and red, as well as different color combos such as white and red. We have white and green and red and black. So I'm not sure what these were for, if there was a point system with them. That's my guess, judging by most camps at that time having a sort of point system to earn the camp emblem. But what's really cool about these is if you look at the bottom two pictures of a yellow beanie, you really get to see this scout's story at Umsteader. He's got a patch from the early 20s on there, or late 20s, being just the generic U with white on green felt, and he's got the 1939 patch. Now, I've also seen a green beanie with some Umsteader patches on it, and from a lot of talking up here in Pittsburgh with several people who have done research, they think that most of the Umsteader emblems were put onto a beanie. They've never seen a photo or ever come across a uniform or anything that has an Umsteader patch on it. A couple sashes, but nobody ever had it in that temporary insignia spot. We find them most commonly on beanies. This beanie, I believe, went for almost $2,000 a few years ago on eBay, and it has 3 Umsteader emblems on it, but then it's got that Kuionic R1, and what a killer piece that is. So that's cool because it really shows that this person was at Umsteader in the late 20s and the early 30s and mid 30s and late 30s and was inducted into Kuionic Lodge, which was founded at Camp Umsteader in 1931. All right, so then on the bottom right, you're going to see that Umsteader chenille, which made Jason Spangler's top 10 scouting auctions a few weeks ago that he posted up there on the Facebook group. That was a surprise to all of us here in Pittsburgh. Nobody had ever seen the Umsteader chenille before. It was made by Standard Pennant. There is an image of the back. I don't have it in the presentation here, but it does have a Standard Pennant label, which matches up with the same time as the Kuionic C1, which would date to the early 40s. That was a killer piece, and we're really surprised at how far it went up there on eBay in price, and would love to see if there's more around. And if anybody has one sitting around, I'd love to pick one up. Maybe not for that price if we can make a deal on it. And then we got one Camp Umsteader neckerchief that we confirmed is Camp Umsteader. That would be the one on the left. It's a pale bluish green with a red stitching. The one on the right is kind of interesting. So probably about 2 years ago, there was a collector in Western PA who found these 2 neckerchiefs that have these stamps on it. Now I have both of them now. I've only scanned one to show you, but they have that same sort of stamp program that a lot of camps used, and specifically Camp Wessico, which was a Westmoreland Fayette Council camp. They were real heavy on the stamp program. This was the first time we had ever seen it used here in Pittsburgh or heard any mention of it, but we definitely know it's out of Pittsburgh because if you look at the sort of center top left of the neckerchief, you're going to see a squirrel stamp that looks different than all the other stamps. That same squirrel pops up on Kuionic Lodge newsletters, Kuionic Lodge handbooks. I mean, the exact same squirrel. There's no denying that it's a Kuionic squirrel. So talking with a couple other collectors, Steve DeWick, a gentleman by the name of Brett McMunn, all we can figure out is that maybe this is an Umsteader item just because of the date. It could be something a little bit later. But we know that that scout was called out into Seneca Lodge, and that's possibly why he has the squirrel stamp on his neckerchief. So that was a cool item. The other one I have that's not scanned does have a swastika stamp on it. It was pretty common to find those back on camp neckerchiefs back in the day. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's an Umsteader neckerchief more than a tie nesta, because tie nesta didn't open up till the mid 50s. And I know the swastika was used a little bit after World War II and all that, but I don't think it was used that late. So that's why I lean personally towards it being more of an Umsteader item more than another camp. All right, so we get some more Umsteader felts here. That one you see on the left there is actually a leather patch from 1931. I believe it to be homemade. Steve DeWick was thinking the same thing, that it was homemade. It's got paint on it. It's got ink on it. It's, a lot of it just sort of points towards it being a homemade item or a handicraft project at camp. And then you start to see more of that signature red and felt with white silk screening. And you see that in 39 and in 1940, which matches up with the Guysuda years, as well as the one that doesn't have a year on it. So going down to the 40s, or up to the 40s here, but on the bottom row, you see this Scout Reservation with an intersecting CU above a fire. That's an accurate size. I scaled those for the presentation so you could see that. It's probably about the size of a Eisenhower dollar. I really think it's a product of the time from World War II. You've got this piece of canvas rather than felt with red ink screen printing on it. And if that doesn't scream World War II era, I don't know what does. And it says 1944, so you can clearly tell that it is. That's actually one of the only Umsteader patches I have, is that 1944 one. You see the same thing in 1945, but those same years, we see these two Ohio Valley Camp Umsteader patches. Ohio Valley was a district located right along the Ohio River. It mainly covered towns such as Bellevue, Avalon, Emsworth, and Sewickley. So the area that Umsteader was in, it's now part of the current Seneca district of the Laurel Highlands Council. They had these patches they used for a camporee for 2 years in a row. You can see that they have very similar sort of smaller felt patches that go on it. If you were to lift that 1944 one off of the red Ohio Valley Camp Umsteader, there's nothing behind it, just a white circle to show where the little segments of the patch went. And then in the bottom right, we have 1946 Camp Umsteader patch. That's the last patch Umsteader ever made. It was done on green felt with white silk screening, and it's the only other Umsteader patch I have besides 1944. That was a killer tradery pickup for me this year. All right, Dean Reservation. Now, I didn't know about Dean Reservation until about March of 2020, when I was very bored and I started digging through a bunch of records at the council office, and I found them. So Dean Reservation was a very, very small camp. It was located in Carnegie Township, donated in memory of Mr. Dean. I wish I knew Mr. Dean's first name. I've never seen a copy of the deed, but every letter in a board minute or something like that that talks about Dean Reservation always talks about his children working with the council and donating it in the memory of their father, Mr. Dean. Never had a first name. I really wish I could find that. So Dean Reservation, very small in Carnegie Township. It was used mainly by Troop 173, and it couldn't have been any more than a couple acres. So you can see here that they have a couple outhouses, and these photos of the bottom row there, they were located in an envelope with the Dean file at the council office, said Dean Reservation. I don't know if they're just houses that are adjoining to the property or if they're actual houses on the camp property, because from all the notes and records of the council, it doesn't say anything other than a couple outhouses at the property and a well house, which you can see a picture of the well house and an outhouse right there on the right. You can see the outhouses in the background and the well house is right there in the front. On the right, we have a clip from an Allegheny Scout Camps camping brochure where it says Allegheny Council has 9 scout camps. And that was the place that made me go looking for Dean Reservation, because I saw it mention Dean, as well as a camp called Eagle's Nest, and I had never heard of these camps before. So I thought that would be a nice clipping there, because it's one of the only other mentionings I can find of Dean in a publication the council put out. Dean Reservation closed in 1969 because when the state was building Route 376, or the Parkway East as we call it, they needed the property camp was on. And so part of the Parkway East, or Route 376, goes right through Dean Reservation. So if you guys drove from Pittsburgh down to Bridgeville for the Pittsburgh Trade of Re, you've been to Dean Reservation because you've driven right through it. Camp Baker. Camp Baker is located in Beaver Falls, PA, in Beaver County. Camp Baker was donated by the Baker Corporation in 1944. It was donated and intended to be a wilderness camp for scouts. It's only about 45 minutes outside of the city of Pittsburgh. There's not much there in terms of facilities you can use. Lots of fields, 6 Adirondacks, and 1 open air shelter, which you can see on the bottom left there. It's Wildman Shelter, built in 1975 in memory of a scout with the last name of Wildman. Now, remember when I had said to take a look at that Camp Laurel Mountain patch and remember the background on it? If you look at the Camp Baker patch in the top left, it's the same design, just the Baker patch has 2 teepees added to it. That's the first Camp Baker Reservation patch ever to come out. They're not a ridiculously hard patch to find, but they are not the easiest camp patch up here. You can see there the 2 segments for Camp Baker that are just like the Camp Guysuda segments we talked about. And then we have the Allegheny Trails Camp Baker patch. That one came out in the late 60s, early 70s. It has the outline of Beaver County, PA, the 3 light blue lines that represent the 3 rivers of Pittsburgh, and the beaver to represent Beaver County. Down here on the bottom right center, we have Camp Baker Service. If you look closely at the shovel, it says ATC for Allegheny Trails Council. That was used for a very long time, and that's also the 10 hours of like Ranger Service patch, just the older version. And then we have the Allegheny Trails. We call it the Chef Keystone patch because the beaver's wearing a chef's hat because he's a baker for Camp Baker, and the Keystone for Pennsylvania, as well as that Beaver County outline again. That patch was in use from the mid 80s up until about 1991-92 when the Greater Pittsburgh Council came into being from the merger of Allegheny Trails and East Valley Area Council. Camp Baker, you're going to see a full Camp Baker collection today because they don't have a lot of patches. Right here we have the generic Camp Baker round and pin. Then we have our 50th anniversary issue, which is a remake of that old camp patch. Back to that 10 hours of service patch again. And then we have the Camp Baker Greater Pittsburgh Council, where the BSA is on the logs of the fire. That was the patch they were using when I first went to Camp Baker. And they used it from about 2003 till about 2017 or so when they finally ran out of them. 2019 on the bottom row there, you're going to see a family camp patch that has that Conestoga wagon that the BSA uses. What's interesting about that patch is it's for an event that never happened. The council had planned to have family camps at Camp Anawana, Camp Seafmac, Camp Potomac, Camp Baker, and Camp Twin Echo. But for some reason, either lack of registration or we couldn't get staff recruited to help with it, all of the camps minus the Camp Twin Echo one were canceled. So we have this patch that mentions almost every camp of the council, but the event only happened at Camp Twin Echo. 2019, again, we have a 75 years of Camp Baker patch, Laurel Highlands Council. They remade that campfire patch. And then in 2019, we also have the first Camp Baker CSP featuring Wildman Shelter. That patch fits with the Greater Laurel Highlands anniversary set that I've mentioned before. And then You guys are also the first ones in the public to see this one too. Patch on the bottom right for Camp Baker. It says Beaver Falls, PA, a remake of the design above. Just came out 2 weeks ago, and they haven't even hit camp yet. So you guys get a sneak peek there. All right, moving on to Hubbard Reservation. Hubbard Reservation was a camp located in Hampton Township, Pennsylvania, what is now the Wildwood Country Club. If you look it up on Google, same property outline, same acreage and everything. And that building on the left right there is actually still there. That's the main clubhouse. And the reason that building is still there is because before the Boy Scouts got it and built Hubbard Reservation, it was bought by John Hubbard and then donated to the Boy Scouts. It was Wildwood Country Club. Then the Boy Scouts had it. Then it was sold to University of Pittsburgh for an outdoor education center, and then became Wildwood Country Club again. So the main lodge there on the left is still in existence today, just with some additions put on. We have 3 felt patches from Camp Hubbard Reservation. The first one there is that really beat up red felt with white silk screening with an intersecting C and U. The next one we discovered at the Pittsburgh Tradery, just an H over the fire. And then the bottom one is an Ohio Valley District camporee from 1953. It says Hubbard. We don't consider that and those Umsteader ones part of the official camp collection because they're a district event patch, but we include them just because of their age and the fact that they mention the camp. The bottom 2 pictures we have here on the left, we have the Scouters Field House, which is no longer there, as well as the caretaker or camp ranger's house. Imagine being a camp ranger and that's the house you get to have at camp. I don't think anybody would complain about that. So the next 3 patches we have from Hubbard are all twill cut edges. The first one is that generic camp image. We see it all the time through the BSA. I can think of 4 camps in my council that have used that same image. Then we have the Hubbard Reservation with the jumping deer. The first one that came out, you can see it's green writing with the green fleur-de-lis. And then the next one, the text is a little bit thicker. And the fleur-de-lis now has a black outline around it. We have a little bit of debate on those 2 patches, if they're a Hubbard Reservation in Hampton Township or Hubbard Reservation, which is further north in Butler, PA, because camps we'll cover in the second part being Camp Seneca and Camp Little Con were on the same property, and they referred to the property, at least on paperwork, as New Hubbard Reservation. So it's kind of caused some mass confusion, and we still debate, are those Hubbard Reservation from Hampton Township, or are those Hubbard Reservation from the 60s and 70s up in Butler, PA. Same thing with the neckerchief you see here with the jumping deer. It says Hubbard Reservation staff. I think that's too new to be a Hubbard Reservation patch because Hubbard Reservation closed in 1956, and a neckerchief in plastic with that kind of silk screening, just it matches a lot of stuff from the 60s. The last one you'll see here is a plaque that says this lodge and surrounding reservation presented to the Allegheny Council Boy Scouts of America by John Hubbard. And it says 1944. So I actually got my date wrong at the top there, 1944. That plaque was on the main lodge of Hubbard Reservation, which is now the clubhouse for Wildwood Country Club. But the plaque now resides at Heritage Reservation in the main office known as Keystone. So a little piece of Hubbard Reservation still survives just a little further south of Pennsylvania.